Former President Donald Trump was indicted today for trying to overturn his loss to Joe Biden.
We have to win in November, or we're not going to have Pennsylvania. They'll change the name. They're going to change the name of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvanians have a unique role with democracy and freedom. We have seen Pennsylvanians rise up at the ballot box.
The work of making this world resemble one that you would prefer to live in is a lunch pail job.
Hi, welcome to the Keystone Reckoning podcast. I'm your host, Jesse White. Today, we're going to be talking about the endorsement or lack thereof of the Pennsylvania Democratic Committee in the upcoming U.S. Senate primary. So for those of you who missed it, the state committee met this past weekend. They met in a hybrid, so it was partially virtual for anybody that couldn't make it due to COVID or, as it turned out, a blizzard, and in person for anybody that wanted to be there. And for those of you that have never been to one of these meetings, this is how it works. It's the state committee members that are elected by different districts all have a vote in whether or not somebody should be endorsed. And the way it works is there's a first ballot, everybody votes, and then you have to get 15% to make it to the second ballot if nobody meets the two-thirds threshold, which is a pretty heavy number to meet. If nobody gets 2/3, everybody that got at least 15% moves on to the second ballot. And that's exactly what happened here. Val Arkush did not get 15%, so she didn't make it to the second ballot. So when they got to the second ballot, Conor Lamb came in with about 61% of the votes. John Fetterman came in at 23%, and Malcolm Kenyatta came in at, now I have to do math, looks like about 16% of the votes. So because nobody got 67%, there was no formal endorsement. So and an interesting side note that Politico picked up on was that there was a counting error where there were several individuals whose votes were not counted. But everybody's been assured, and the Lamb campaign has acknowledged that it was a technical difficulty that came along with the hybrid approach because it was the first time it had been done, and that that they knew it wouldn't have made a difference. So it was, it was one of those things where, yes, there was a little bit of a stumble, but it had no bearing on the actual result. So, and it's interesting that the way that the different candidates approached it, right? So the Lamb campaign obviously was putting a lot of emphasis on this. They saw this as a big opportunity to jump over Fetterman in money and momentum more than anything else. So from all accounts, Conor Lamb was working the phones pretty hard. He was calling committee people multiple times. They were doing mailers. They were doing, it was basically a little mini election that most voters will never, we don't even see. They were basically campaigning to a very small set of people that would have the power to give an endorsement. So there was a heavy pitch made there. And obviously he did well. I mean, in addition to this, as part of the 61 to 62% he brought in, he also got the endorsement of the state committee Hispanic caucus, which is definitely nothing to sneeze at. So, and the reason that was given behind that, they talked about Conor's accessibility and all these things. Now, it should be noted that, Conor also, he's kind of come by the title of institution candidate, insider candidate, honestly, in that, he first ascended to Congress in a similar process in the old 18th congressional district. He was nominated at a nominating convention among committee people, and he worked the process. He used his political connections, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just what he did, and he was able to jump into that race. He beat Rick Saccone. He gets elected to Congress, and the first big victory after Trump was elected in that special election that had national attention. And then redistricting, he gets into a safer district, and now it looks like the district's going to disappear. So he decides to run for U.S. Senate. Okay, so that gets us to where we're at. There's clearly, Conor is definitely a moderate to conservative Democrat by anybody's accounting, including his own. And there are people that are saying, well, that's exactly what you need because we need a centrist. We need someone that can, be a voice of reason and moderation that could win statewide. The left side of the party is saying that's exactly what they say about Joe Manchin. And do we want to go through all of this to get a Democrat elected who at the end of the day isn't going to be all in on Democratic policies and ideals? And that's a valid complaint. I mean, a valid concern that, we're about to go to war against whoever the Republicans put up for this crucially important U.S. Senate seat to replace Pat Toomey. And if at the end of the day we get somebody that we're nothing but frustrated with the entire way through, it's going to be a big letdown for people. It's going to be a huge frustration. So there's a lot of concern on that part of it. And we're as this election gets closer, we're going to dig deeper and deeper into this on the podcast. There's a lot, I have a lot of stuff planned that we're going to talk about and people that we're going to talk to about this race. But I think that this endorsement situation is a good microcosm of kind of where things sit. So you have Conor, who's working the inside game to some success, but not the level of success where he could have come out and declared a clear victory in the process. It should also be noted that Conor is getting a lot of endorsements from like the building trades and a lot of traditional Democratic stakeholders. And this is a whole other subject for debate. I would make the argument that the building trades and organized labor are not the Democratic stalwarts that everybody thinks they are or that they once were, because I think if you look at where they actually give their money and their support, I think you'll see that it's not really what people think it is. But that's, again, something for another day. So that's the Conor Lamb situation. The Fetterman folks came out afterwards and, knowing that they couldn't possibly win the endorsement, kind of made it as a badge of honor. Right. That, we weren't trying for it. So the fact that we didn't get it doesn't really make a difference. That's the way that they framed it. And, that's the smart thing to do politically, right? If you know you're not going to win, you basically say, well, we didn't want it anyway. And that seems to be exactly what Fetterman did. And given the fact that Fetterman has, a polling lead, given the fact that he's raised so much money, because of his, national profile, that's probably the right tack, right? He's going to say, okay, so the insiders don't want John Fetterman to win, right? He could turn that around and use that almost as a rallying cry and say, look, the establishment doesn't want John Fetterman, therefore you should want John Fetterman if you don't want, if you want to, the Democratic version of draining the swamp, so to speak. It's interesting to see how that's going to play out. Because I think there is a thought, hey, wait a minute, John Fetterman's the sitting lieutenant governor. There should be, shouldn't it be a done deal that the party should be behind him? Well, obviously you see, anybody that's on, that's been paying attention to this has known for a while that's not the case. And I think that other people, the casual observers of this, casual voters, are going to start to see that too, that it's not, it's by far not the slam dunk that everybody thought it was going to be. And, and there are a lot of reasons for that also. I think that, and again, this is something we'll get into in a lot more detail. I think that Republicans, I think that their opposition research on John Fetterman is much deeper than the op research they have on Conor Lamb. And that's just the reality of it all. I think there's, not that there's some dirt or skeletons or anything. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about good, policy arguments, established positions, things of that nature, that they'll be able to haul out and give, a better argument against Fetterman than they would against Lamb. But at the same time, there's something to be said for enthusiasm. And if Democrats are enthusiastic about John Fetterman and they're lukewarm on Conor Lamb, I'm talking about the progressive end of the party, the activists, the people that knock the doors and make the phone calls and write the postcards. If they're not excited about Conor Lamb, then they're not going to, you're not going to get the same enthusiasm. And an enthusiasm gap is important. So a lot of moving parts here. The other piece of this that needs to be discussed is Malcolm Kenyatta, the state representative from Philadelphia, African-American, openly gay candidate who announced very early. And, he's gotten some significant endorsements and he's, out there doing the work, like the other candidates. Obviously, he doesn't have the financial resources. He doesn't have the name ID, especially outside of Philadelphia. But it will be very interesting to see where he comes down in this. Is he going to stay in this to the end? Where if he does, I think that hurts John Fetterman if it's a close race. I think the progressives that would be voting for Malcolm would probably be votes that would normally go to Fetterman. However, there's also the issue with Fetterman and the story about him chasing down the African American with a shotgun outside of his home years ago. And that has left a bad, bitter taste in the mouth of a lot of folks as well. So there's, it's not a given, but I think that there would be more inclined to swing Fetterman's way at the end of the day. So you have all these different moving parts, but to me, when you add all this up and you look at it, it doesn't really change a whole lot, right? There's, Fetterman has the money and the lead in the polls. Conor has the institutional support. Malcolm Kenyatta has kind of a small but devoted following. And Val Arkush is kind of on the fringe and would have to do, I think, something pretty substantial to really make a significant inroads at this point. But again, who knows? There's being the only woman in the race, there's something to be said for that. She's from the Southeast. There's it's a very vote rich environment in a Democratic primary. So there are a lot of things there. But to me, the fact that the party didn't endorse is a blessing, because all what's going to happen, what have happened is, if the party had endorsed and everybody just goes and does what they were going to damn well do anyway, all you're doing is setting up all these Democratic infighting and all these, these little, these battles of, in every county. Well, I'm for Fetterman. Well, you can't be because you're a state committee person. The party endorsed this person. And it turns into just a giant mess. It's just a huge mess of Democrats fighting with Democrats over, a lot of inside baseball that really doesn't seep its way out into the general population. And it just creates a lot of disharmony and a lot of conflict within the party, which obviously is something nobody wants right now. So I think in a race this high profile, I think the goal, and clearly I think that was the goal of the other candidates, was just prevent Conor Lamb from getting the endorsement so we can avoid all of these things. And I think that's where we ended up. So in a way, I think it's better. And personally, I think it's better to leave this as an open primary. We still have plenty of time. These are very different candidates with very different policies, very different personal stories. And I think there will be a very clear contrast for the voters to choose from. And I think that the voters are definitely paying attention. This isn't going to be some race where no one knows what's going on. We're going to know who we're for and what we're about. And that is, that's a good thing. It gives the candidates the opportunity to do outreach until the last minute and to kind of work off of a blank slate. So, sometimes the best action is no action, and that's what we saw here. So that was just a quick update on what happened in with the Democratic Senate primary. Obviously, and we'll talk about this more coming up soon, is the Republican primary, where we're already seeing not just ads, but we're seeing negative ads between Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick and all this other crazy stuff. So the spending there is already getting ridiculously out of control. And as to be expected when you have a bunch of really rich people that no one knows about. So you have to do a ton of money on name ID and those sorts of things. So it just goes to show that this is going to be one of the most expensive Senate races in U.S. history, from the time we start to the time we're done. And I think I'd be remiss if I was talking about the state committee without mentioning one of the most impressive feats I've ever seen, which is Josh Shapiro going unopposed for the endorsement for governor, because he is running unopposed. And that is a pretty damn impressive thing to do. And it goes to show the strength of Josh's political machine, and that he was able to establish that as someone who ran statewide in 2020 and won, where other than Joe Biden, Josh is the only person that won his reelect for attorney general. He showed he could win statewide. He can raise a ton of money. He's well vetted. He's been around, and he's going to, he was clearly the best candidate in terms of the absolute necessity of holding the governor's mansion. And I think that everybody kind of saw that, and there were people that were looking at it and realized that this was just going to be a a bad. You were going to make more enemies than friends by jumping in and mounting a hopeless campaign in a primary where you were going to be dramatically outspent. You were going to attack the front runner, which would have then given ammo to the Republicans. This way, the Shapiro campaign can sit back. They can hold on to their money. They can keep their powder dry and wait for the Republican bloodbath to sort itself out. Although I firmly am in the camp of believing that it will be Doug Mastriano, the psycho state senator, is going to emerge on the Republican side. But that's a debate for another day. So anyway, that's our update. And I will be back. We have a couple of really cool things coming up in the next couple of days. A very interesting congressional candidate. I'm not going to say anything else, but we'll be talking to her later this week. And I will be talking also about the lieutenant governor's race, which ties into some of these things, but it merits its own conversation. So stay tuned for those. As always, I appreciate your listening. You can learn more at KeystoneReckoning.com. We function solely on donations. So please, if you have the opportunity, KeystoneReckoning.com, there's a huge donate button, takes you directly to our Act Blue, and that allows us to have the resources to keep the podcast going and do the voter outreach that we need. Thank you very much. I'm Jesse White. Have a great day.